And we can get some more reaction on this. With me here in the studio is Femi Sori from Our Future, Our Choice campaign. It's a group of young people who want to stay in Brexit. And I'm also joined from Newcastle by Tom Harwood, who ran the National Student Wing of Vote Leave. And let's start with you, Tom. That was a speech from Boris Johnson, which was designed to say, look, we can have a brighter future outside the EU. Presumably you welcome that. Do you think it's important for him to set out that pitch?
Oh, absolutely. I think this speech was long overdue. On the 24th of June, after the referendum, Vote Leave shut up shop, and it seems like we haven't been making the case as well as we could have been over the last 2 years, whereas the Remain campaign has continued to spit out its Project Fear. I think it's really important to make the positive case about all of the benefits that Brexit can bring, and so this speech was very overdue.
So, Femi Sori here in the studio. There's been too much Project Fear from people like you.
Yeah, and I agree that the way the Remain campaign was run was completely wrong. David Cameron chose to basically say you need the single market or the zombies will come or your economy will collapse, and nobody on either the Remain or the Leave side actually explaining what is the single market. And it can be done in 20 seconds. You can just say the single market is a system that lets you make a single version of your product and it will be legal everywhere in Europe. That means you can buy and sell your products a hell of a lot cheaper.
So what did you make of what Boris Johnson had to say? His was a message designed to reassure people like you.
It was designed to reassure people. I just don't think that he's the person to do it. I think that a proven lie that he's repeated several times, the £350 million on the bus that would supposedly go to the NHS, even though he voted against giving money towards the NHS after Brexit. I don't think we can believe him on that. And again, he's doing the same thing that David Cameron did. David Cameron said you need the single market. Boris Johnson is saying you don't need the single market, and nobody's actually going into the detail. He hasn't given any actual hard detail on these issues.
What about that point, Tom? A lot of people were hoping we'd get some more specifics for Boris Johnson. They were decidedly lacking in this speech.
I think he gave quite a few specifics in the speech. He spoke about how the single market doesn't make it that much easier for British businesses to go out. He gave the example of becoming a ski instructor. It's still quite hard to go to France and do that. The single market is often trumped up as this panacea, as this wonderful thing for business, when actually, in reality, what it does is it imposes EU regulations on 100% of UK businesses when only 6% export to the EU. What's really important here, though, is that the idea that the Brexit dividend, the £350 million a week that was spoken of during the campaign, that's the gross figure, the net is about half of that. That money will be coming back to the UK. And when we actually leave the EU, we will be able to spend that money on services like the NHS.
Well, of course, that's a much disputed claim, and of course the net figure is much lower than that. But what about Boris Johnson's assertion there that there is a growing efforts to try to stop Brexit, and that any attempt to try to row back would lead to greater division and betrayal? Isn't that likely to simply increase the sense of division in the country?
Absolutely not. I think what would increase the sense of division is a second referendum. We had a period of intense debate over the course of the referendum, and it's time now to come together. To the idea that we should have a second referendum, that we should refight all these battles, that we should say that, oh, people weren't actually voting to leave this or that. The fact is that we voted leave, and people need to accept it. And the only way that we're going to get on as a society and start coming together again is by working together to achieve this liberal vision that Boris Johnson set out in his speech today.
And Femi, Tom, we'll leave it there, but Femi, sorry, here in the studio, is that not a relevant point, that we've had the referendum, people like yourself should accept it and try to make Brexit work?
Well, he's pointing out the divisions that were created by Brexit. One of the main divisions is the age division. I mean,
well, two young people here on different sides of the argument.
I know, and it's kind of ironic that, I mean, young people, the age group that I'm sure my friend there represents, 18, 24-year-olds, we voted 75% to Remain. So young people don't want Brexit. In fact, the under 55 population of the UK doesn't want Brexit. So by anyone's maths, in 5 years, we have a population that voted to remain in the EU.
But we've still got that vote in 2016 to leave. Don't you have to now accept that?
Well, it's not like nothing has happened as a result of that vote. And this notion that it's a second referendum I don't feel that really holds much water, because it'd be referendum on a completely different thing. Right now we have a deal. We still don't know what that deal is going to be. We don't even, I mean, Theresa May doesn't even know what she wants that deal to be, let alone having anything concrete. When we actually know something, at least in some sort of preliminary stage, then we actually know what this future is going to look like. And the people who are supposed to be taking back control in this day and age, they should have a say in whether or not this deal is going to harm or benefit their future. That should be in the people's domain.
Tom, what about that point? There was a vote on the principle of leaving or remaining. There wasn't a chance for the people to have their say on a future deal.
This idea that the people didn't know what they were voting for is quite frankly insulting to the 17.4 million people across the UK who voted leave on the basis of what people on the Remain side and the Leave side said. It was said repeatedly throughout the referendum that we would be leaving the single market and leaving the customs union. The Remain side spelled out the economic Armageddon they said that would ensure, whereas the Leave side set out the freedoms that would enable our country to embrace. We had that argument. There's no point in having that argument again and again and again, because all it's going to do is continue to perpetuate this division. What we need to do is come together and ignore the arguments of people like Lord Adonis and Nigel Farage, who want us to have a second referendum, who think that people who voted leave are all inward-looking and isolationist. What we need to do is accept that the vast majority of people in this country are outward-looking and global in their perspective, and we need to make Brexit work for that. And that doesn't mean more endless referendums until people get the right answer. That means coming together as one nation and building that brighter future that we can all see.
Tom Harwood, thank you very much for that from Newcastle. And just a quick response to you, Femi, here in the studio. That point that if you continue these arguments, you are simply increasing and continuing the divisions in the country.
Well, one of the biggest divisions, as I mentioned, is between families. As in, many families don't talk about politics anymore. And so I think if the only way we can actually bring people together, knowing that we will soon have a population that voted to remain in the EU in the majority, is for people to say, all right, my kids, they don't want the future that's currently being forced on them. Let's actually unite in just this fact that we know who's going to be most affected by this vote. Let's vote with them. Let's give them the future that they want.
Okay, Femi, sorry. Tom Harwood, thank you both very much indeed.